everyone, welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston and we're recording on the Monday morning after Manchester United were defeated in the Manchester derby 3-0 by Manchester City, of course, on the Sunday evening at Old Trafford. I think sadly, guys, Samuel Luckhurst and Rich Fay was probably a result we expected. We all saw it coming. The game developed as we thought it would. 3-0, Samuel, a really terrible performance. This podcast is going to be another inquest, isn't it?
Unfortunately it is, and contrary to popular belief, we're not always itching for United to get beaten, because as Chris Wheeler was saying to me yesterday before the game, he was saying, look, we could really do without an inquest tomorrow. I'm off on Monday. I suspect he's not off today now, because there's going to be a demand for coverage as to what's going wrong at United, and a hell of a lot is going wrong. I don't think any of us really envisaged this spiral to happen so quickly or so spectacularly. And that derby yesterday, I think that's probably the most sobering for United fans of all the derby defeats they've had in the past decade. And it was reminiscent of too many. It was reminiscent of the 3-0 under Moyes, the two, I think there were a couple of 2-0s under Solskjaer, that League Cup first leg under Solskjaer when they were 3-0 down at half time as well. And City at the moment are at their absolute apex under Pep Guardiola, and their supporters are singing chants that United fans would have been singing yesteryear. And I think that's the starkness of it. There was one chant City fans were singing, Champions of England, Champions of Europe, that United fans used to chant verbatim 15 years ago when they were the Champions of England, they were the Champions of Europe. The way it's going, you talk about 15 years, I think United seem destined to go at least 15 years without winning the league. But looking at more immediate matters at hand, Erik Ten Hag just had a dreadful day. It was one of his worst days as United manager. The selections, when that team dropped, I think a lot of United fans were completely startled.
Was it horrendous or was it disgraceful on chat? You said I did the podcast.
Yeah, I did say that team is a disgrace. The back four, I think you said it. I put it in the blog for the Brentford game. I'd called it an unbefitting defence of Manchester United. And I really think Ten Hag has looked at that defence, having started it against Brentford and Sheffield United, and they won, and thought, well, we can win again with that defence, as if that's remotely relevant when you're coming up against the best club team in the world, and probably the best array of attackers in any club side as well. And that defence was asking for it, and they got it. Again, Diogo Dalot breaks off from the lineup, and he's really pumped up with the supporters, and then he doesn't back it up during the game. Johnny Evans played like a 35-year-old against Erling Haaland. Victor Lindelof at left back, I can't fathom. He doesn't play well at left back. He isn't a left back. Just play a left back. That was the reason why they signed Sergio Reguilon on loan. Varane, okay, in midweek, he was pretty creaky in that first half against Copenhagen, but he is still their best centre back, and just logically, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. You put him down to start ahead of Maguire and ahead of Evans, and further up top, McTominay goes. He's an attacking midfielder in the first half, then he's a defensive midfielder in the second half. I thought Eriksen in midfield was misguided as well. I agreed with the decision to start Eriksen, but putting him in midfield against City, he was always bound to get overwhelmed. Sofiane Amrabat just operating at the sedate Serie A pace. And the thing with that is that there were people at United that foresaw that problem with Amrabat. There were people at the club that weren't convincing him. But as they have done under Ten Hag, they've bought players from the manager rather than the football club. And a serious football club does not operate that way.
When the team news dropped, Rich, right, we saw that team. Varane on the bench, Reguilon on the bench. Everyone presumed it was for fitness reasons.
Yeah.
Obviously, both have had little niggles in the last few weeks. As Samuel says, Lindelof at left back, Johnny Evans at centre half. And then he comes out and says it was for tactical reasons. And At that point, do you take that for face value? He doubles down in Sky Sports when he speaks to the rights holders. Samuel asked him in the press conference to press them on the issue.
Triple down.
Yeah, triple down, if you can say that. And then he gave a tactical explanation why he actually made those selections. But surely that's just baffling. It's indefensible. And so you've got a World Cup winner, and you're starting him over a defender who's relegated with Leicester and released on a free.
Well, someone live said, there's shades of Louis van Gaal creeping in with Erik Ten Hag lately.
That's the big worry.
And, it is... You just look at United now. Spent £400 million on Erik Ten Hag, and they're approaching a derby the same way Solskjaer used to approach a derby fundamentally. And I know you can say, look, we've had the injury problems. That's always going to be a caveat. It's always going to be some sort of mitigation. But fundamentally, you're now making selections that just do not make sense whatsoever. And Ty made a great point yesterday as well. He said, look, United have now made a half-time sub in 7 of their 9 home games this season, in the last 4 games in a row as well. You can, sometimes you praise the manager and say, oh, he's quick to use his bench. It also means he's got his selection wrong 4 weeks in a row now because he's had to go to the bench at half-time. And everyone knew when that team dropped yesterday that it just wasn't good enough and you were asking for trouble. I mean, Johnny Evans didn't even play against Haaland last season because he was injured both times. Throwing him in against him in a derby alongside Harry Maguire is just...
suicidal, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you're asking for it. And like Samuel said, it's not just even Haaland, it's all the other attackers they've got. And while everyone knows the problems at United will all stem from the top and he can always find the routes back to there, but fundamentally right now, Ten Hag is not doing what's required of him, and he can't be faultless in all this. You can't keep looking far apart, and every time United lose, you can't keep on saying it's the owners, because that is Ten Hag's team. It's got his blueprints on it now. £400 million spent, the team that he chose to play the game, and they just weren't good enough on the day. And the substitutions were ludicrous. You only had to hit the booze again when Højlund was taken off. That I do agree to an extent that Højlund didn't quite do enough on the day, but it's what it represents. This is your guy. And if you're then saying, well, we have to protect him, well, why do you spend so much money on him in the first place? Why have you taken such a gamble on this young man? Because he is a quality striker, he's got the potential there, but the pressure is going to kill him, and you can't keep throwing him under the bus like that.
We'll go into the penalty show then, talking about Højlund. I mean, it was incredibly soft, Samuel, the opening goal. It probably was a penalty when VAR reviewed it. What did you make of that? What was your opinion? Because Ten Hag came out after the game and he kind of said that was a key moment, but if we're being honest, City were just a different class and they would have won the game anyways.
Well, that was, in a way, it's the annoying thing because yes, you see fouls like that are not given, but you have to look at that in isolation. It was a foul, it happened in the penalty area, so therefore it's a penalty. And of course, you'll have the paranoid fans on Twitter who'll say, well, what about this one, this time, and this screenshot, and that, and what have you. The whataboutery, I mean, I've got no time for it really. At that very moment, you just have to judge it for what it is. And it was daft of Højlund, and unfortunately his rawness was exposed at both ends with that, and also with the one-on-one that he pretty much scuppered himself because he didn't get the ball, he didn't take the right trajectory or go the right. When he got it, I think Stones got a touch for it as well, which almost helped him. Yeah. But he didn't get away from Stones. He didn't time. Sorry, it's not the timing of it, but
I think you said with Harry Kane, he would use his body in such a way that he would protect the ball.
Yeah, and Kane's not as quick as Højlund, but he would have ensured that he got in front of the defender, so the defender couldn't take him out. And if he takes him out, he's sent off, and he possibly gets a penalty as well, or he just goes one-on-one, and chances are he scores. And I felt sorry for Højlund in the sense that, and I feel sorry for him. He is fulfilling a role he should not be fulfilling. He should not be leading the line for Manchester United. He's too young, he's too raw, he's got a mediocre goal scoring record, and that is on the club because they didn't have the ambition to get one of the handful of proven strikers, goal scorers out there. They had to test the water with Harry Kane. One, because Ten Hag wanted him. Two, I really do think if they'd really gone, pushed the boat out for him, I think they might have got him in the end because Tottenham absolutely had to sell him, and United, chances are they'd have outbid Bayern Munich for him. And also, if there is a bidding war, I think Kane would have said, I want to sign for Manchester United. That would always have been his preference. There was some talk about when he even got on the plane going to Munich, and there was still some uncertainty about the deal because of changes being made and whether he was having a change of heart. So it doesn't help. One, you've got a raw striker tasked with scoring goals in a team that struggled for goals last season, and lo and behold, now the goal scoring record in the team is worse. Haaland has scored as many Premier League goals as United have this season. They've got -5 goal difference in the Premier League. There was that breakdown of all the forwards in the Premier League this season. Rashford is the only one with a Premier League goal. Højlund has not got a goal in 7 Premier League games.
Which means Jadon Sancho is joint second then, isn't he?
Well,
with 0
exactly.
goals.
They did, and this graphic did even, like, I think it was almost like twisting the knife, really. It did mention Sancho because he has had minutes in the Premier League. And that is a failing on the club's planning. And Ten Hag has to take accountability for that because, okay, he didn't get the one he really wanted. Despite what United say that they got their first choice target, they didn't. That was Kane, and they didn't get him. They got Højlund. And if you're going to, shop at that category, you've either got to get someone in who's got a really compelling goal scoring record at their past clubs. Højlund didn't have that, and also you've got to have someone who's going to ease the burden on him. United were talking about Rashford doing that in the summer, as if he's a competent centre forward. He's not. They realised that Ten Hag belatedly realised that after 2 games. He's played him on the left, and he's even performing like a drain there. Anthony Marshall is a complete non-entity. He may start against Newcastle because it's the League Cup, but I think the way it's going, and given the time that Højlund came off, the chances are Højlund will start, and he should start as well. But that planning is just staggering. Højlund should be occupying the role Alvarez occupied at City last season, learning his trade behind one of the best goal scorers around. And United are not. That's again, in terms of, you talk about the chasm, that's a chasm in terms of planning between the clubs. And United can carp on about FFP and profitability and sustainability rules, and I get that. But if they were better at selling players and they got more players out, then they would be able to spend more. And if you're talking about the spending, yes, there are constraints, there are nuances with it. They have spent more than £400 million under this manager. And there are so many of those signings are just duds. I mean, Anthony yesterday was an absolute disgrace. It was a disgrace that he was shaking his head on the bench. I don't know why. It was completely the right decision not to start him because he's been dreadful this season. And when he came on,
that kick out was just stupid.
I wish
it's almost like some players try and, when not playing well, they try and just go in with. I'm not using the term passion merchant, but do you know what I mean? Some players just over-egg it and try and get the crowd on side by
Fernandes did
roughing them up and stuff. But Anthony, what is he playing that?
I think when Hannibal Mejbri did it at Anfield, you could kind of forgive it more because he was a young player. It was his second appearance, I think, for the club. Anthony's meant to be a senior player, and he was just a disgrace. I mean, the referee would have done United a favour if he'd sent him off and ensured that he was suspended for 3 games. And unfortunately, that's not the case. But this, again, you talk about where do United go from here, and that's a big issue because I don't think any of us are saying sack the manager, but I also feel that we are possibly past the point of no return under Ten Hag, that I can't see United becoming a genuine, credible force under him now because of the way things have spiralled. And if you do change the manager, which again I'm not advising right now, what's going to be required? A rebuild, and that new manager will probably come in and say, that £85 million winger that you sign over there, I don't want.
But they're all his players now as well.
Yeah, they're all his players, and this rebuild hasn't even been completed. So, as you say,
and someone said there as well, you can't then keep on saying let's throw money at it. You can't just look at yesterday and say buy him a new centre back, buy him this and that, because where's the evidence they'll get the right player in? Where's the evidence they'll get someone that's actually going to work? I mean, I know it's really easy to say that every time United lose, they need a new centre back. It's obviously do need better players fundamentally there, but there is no track record to suggest they would get one in January or next summer anyway. So how much more money do you throw at this?
I mean, I've been saying for weeks on this podcast and writing actually that, I mean, we all have, that the cracks have been there. Even when they've been winning games, it's been very, very unconvincing.
Well, and Samuel said earlier as well, Ten Hag's logic of picking the same back four that had got very fortuitous wins in these past 3 games, is that undermines it all altogether. And there was like some sort of false optimism going into the game that, United got confidence, they've got the momentum going. But you just have to look back at those last 3 wins that they had going into the derby to see they were so flawed and they were so gettable anyway. And they were disgraceful against Sheffield United in the early stages. They were against Copenhagen as well. They got away with it in the end, and against a team like City, against most teams in the Premier League, they just will not get away with it.
But that's the most concerning aspect, isn't it? Because Ten Hag, right, he's supposed to be different to his predecessor in the sense that he'd have principles, a style of play, the team would be organised. No matter what, we thought that's what we're going to get from him. And then this season, it's just been a mess. There's no identity, there's no
style.
You look at them, you think, what are they trying to do? And
that's what we were saying when we left Old Trafford.
Before that talent on the pitch, that's unforgivable, really.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we left Old Trafford yesterday, we were saying, what is Man United's style of play? If you literally ask Ten Hag or ask one of his players, what is it you are trying to do on the pitch? They aren't then backing it up with their approach, their tactical approach, their formation, the way they play. And I think, was it Jamie Carragher who said, what do they do during the week? What do they actually work on?
And we were saying that under Solskjaer as well.
And that's what's more frustrating for me. It's the fact that in 2 years' time, they spent £400 million and are back at square one again.
Presume neither of you saw these quotes, actually. They were via place with Dutch media. And Ten Hag was asked why he couldn't play like how Ajax play at Manchester United. And he responded, we will never be able to do that. The players decide how you play was basically the crux of that answer there, just don't like. And
that in Dutch that you gave that?
Yeah, to via place, it was shared on social media just earlier on today. Actually, it came out. I'm surprised it hadn't emerged last night actually, but those quotes have just came around. But what do you think of that?
That almost sounds defeatist in that if you're bowing to the players' demands, then you might as well get out of there. I don't buy that, and I mean the Ajax comparison. Yeah, you want to play good football. There's no point even talking about what he did in the Eredivisie because it was in the Eredivisie. But Postecoglou's gone into Tottenham. Everyone knows how they play. He's put his imprint on them very quickly. Unai Emery has done it at Aston Villa as well. And it's getting to the point now that, speaking to our colleague and United fan Liam Corliss earlier, he was suggesting that Emery would actually be a good shout to manage United. That's how bad and how soul destroying he
Emery's
feels at the moment. Well,
bring that tweet back out.
And so, yeah, but this is the problem United have got, because if you're talking about where they go from here managerial wise, there's not a standout candidate. I think they've got to try and ride this out. The season is just about still salvageable. But I maintain, in terms of the end goal for Manchester United has to be to win the Premier League. It has to win the title. And unfortunately, I think too much has happened in the last few months that for them, that's just not going to happen now under Ten Hag. And I know there's a big problem in City in that City are awesome, and Bernardo Silva was majestic yesterday, and he's been majestic before at Old Trafford as well. And Haaland is an awesome goal scorer. You look at that City team, back to front, it is best in class.
But then again, second half they were superb, to be fair. But apart from that, they weren't. Didn't feel like they got out first.
And that's the biggest problem.
That's why it's so insulting, isn't it? The performance.
It is like watching. I was saying to Rich yesterday that yesteryear, like school kids in Manchester, they go to Old Trafford one week and Main Road the other week and watch both teams. If you had that now, the kids would be going home to their parents or going to their school teachers saying, "Have we watched a different sport at Old Trafford?" Because the way City operate compared to United, they're just poles apart.
If we're holding into a few decisions, and I know we already kind of have done, but it's the decision to replace Amrabat at half-time. The midfield was a bit of a mess in the second half. I mean, it wasn't the first half, but McTominay, he was quite effective in a more advanced position, I thought. We know he can't play defensive midfield. He gets put there. He's pretty poor, exposed again. The decision to bring Højlund off was obviously met with boos, and we've had a lot of that this season. And it just kind of feels like that connection with fans, it's slowly getting eroded again between the team and the supporters.
Yeah, the Højlund one, every time he's going to get subbed, I think there'll be boos just because, as someone said, there is no other option to play up front. He's the only central striking option, but you've put all your eggs in one basket with Højlund, and it's a combination of his performance fundamentally not being good enough, the fact that the pressure's got to carry on building. You really hope it doesn't affect him too much and knock all of his confidence out there, because there is a good player in there. But I think that's the bigger concern, isn't it? It's the fact that the fans who were so behind Ten Hag last season, and there's always been the rhetoric. He's had a lot to deal with off the pitch. Fair play to him for that. He did come in as this sort of totalitarian. He's put his foot down, but he's kind of only got that approach now. He's only sort of a disciplinarian, whereas lots of other managers, you need to be able to handle players in different ways. Some of them need an arm around the shoulder. Some of them need to be told off, quite frankly. But Ten Hag, you sense there's only one sort of mood of him, and it is just a real fierce sort of strict school teacher. And if he fell out with the players he's fallen out with, he managed to get rid of Ronaldo. He won on that one. You look at the other players, he's trying to get rid of Sancho. What happens if he had a fallen out with someone like Fernandes or Rashford, one of the absolute kings of this dressing room? Then the players could start to turn on him as well. I mean, the fans are starting to see. But
on the flip side, we'll welcome that, and the dressing room did need that firm approach.
It did need that approach. Yeah, it definitely did. But it only works if the players buy into what you're doing and they see that this is a guy worth being behind. This is a guy that we're going to fight for on the pitch because we know what we're trying to do. We know what the end goal is, and we believe in this man. Does anyone believe, like Sam said, no one believes that he's going to win the title this season? I would be surprised if they got into the top four again this season just because of the competition there. I mean, we saw Liverpool win again on Sunday. We saw Villa win. Brighton got a point at Fulham. I mean, there's no guarantees of a top four finish this season. I just think that belief that was there last season and it was used as a season of progress. I think Neville called it sort of a bridge season or a gap season where you put the foundations down and then you build on top. Well, they put the foundations down, they bulldoze them again. Where are they? They're back to square one again. And you can't keep going in that cycle because the longer they do, people start to see the cracks and the players will start to believe it as well. And as soon as Ten Hag loses the dressing room or all the fans, then it's curtains.
An absolute mess, but we've got more to sink our teeth into in part two. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to part two of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Samuel, that defeat meant United have lost 5 of their 10 league games for the first time since 1986-87, which highlights just how quite bad and poor this start has been. You talked about there the point of no return with Ten Hag kind of turning it around in the long term, but in the short term, do you think he can kind of recapture some form and improve the results? Because we've just talked about how poor the style of players. Surely that's something that just doesn't improve in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks time. That's ingrained, isn't it?
Yeah, and every team they come up against, they're going to fancy their chances against Man United, and we've seen that at Old Trafford in recent weeks. Teams are going to United and they're utterly unfazed. I mean, Crystal Palace lost there in the League Cup, but it was almost as if they lulled them into a full sense of security ahead of beating them on the Saturday, and they did beat them. I mean, how many home games have they lost now this season? They've lost against City, Palace, Galatasaray as well.
You think how good the home form was last season as well? It was their strongest point, wasn't it?
Well, there was that stat yesterday that they've been in front for 29 minutes in home games in the Premier League this season, and they've been losing for 200 odd of those minutes. There's no hiding place at the moment, and they've not got a period where Ten Hag can, gather them, get them together. I mean, what they need is, it feels like it's almost if they could pause the season like they did with the World Cup last year and have a mini pre-season, they would accept that offer in an instant, but they can't do that. Newcastle have a score to settle on Wednesday. Fulham have not started well this season, but 12:30 at Craven Cottage on Saturday, you can see that going all right for United. And then they're in a very atmospheric ground against Copenhagen next week, and you think, well, it's just as well that at least these bank of fixtures end with Luton at home before the November internationals, because I mean they should at least win that one. But as you just alluded to there, in terms of implementing a style, he would have to make very drastic changes to that team now, and I don't think he necessarily knows. He can't know what the right changes are that can be made, because look at what's happened so far this season. And you sympathise with him to an extent that he's not been able to pick his strongest team all season. But again, they decided to sign Højlund knowing that he was going to be out for a month, and also knowing that he had a mediocre goal scoring record in Italy, and what you see is what you get. I don't think any of us are surprised that he's not scored from his first 7 Premier League games. But there have to be drastic changes in other areas of the squad, because you've invested in Højlund and he is trying his heart out. Rashford has to be dropped, and he should have been dropped some time ago. 1 goal in 13 games is appalling. His body language is appalling. It was again yesterday. When he was substituted, a lot of supporters cheered him off. That is telling. You can't keep persevering with someone who is in a rut, frankly, and he's got fewer goals than he did this time a couple of seasons ago, and he ended that season with five goals for United. I don't think it's necessarily left field because he was quite prominent in pre-season until he got injured, but I think he's got to start Mainu now. I think that they've got to use this Newcastle game, although it's a cup tie, they've got to use it as a game to turn the page and really just freshen up that team, bring some players in who you are going to invest in the long term, who you look at them, you think, okay, we could have an identity with those players, Højlund, Garnacho, Mainu, and of course they're going to need some experience as well. Mason Mount, I think he possibly just gets in by default, but we're all asking, every week it seems like we're all asking each other, what does Mason Mount do? And again, you go back to the planning from United, I thought from the outset that was just a mismatch. I mean, when Liverpool were in for Mount, I thought that makes sense. Mount under Klopp, playing as the advanced midfielder behind Salah, Nunez, Jota, whoever, Gakpo or Luis Diaz. I thought, yeah, I can completely buy into that. I never really thought that with United, and then United decide to rebrand him as a midfielder, and nobody was referring to Mason Mount as a midfielder at Chelsea. Everyone thought him as an attacking midfielder. He was playing high up, a playmaker. And watching him this season, I'm not surprised that it's gone as badly as it has, because one, look at all the signings United have made in recent years and players who have fallen by the wayside, but also it just seemed like a mismatch. I just think he chose the wrong club. And it'd been interesting, had Liverpool got in the Champions League, whether Mount would have gone there. You sometimes wonder, Champions League football and being able to offer it, how much of a factor is it? Because Liverpool were clearly in for him. I thought that would have been the logical move, and sometimes, players are just starstruck by the option of, or the opportunity of staying in the Champions League, but already Mount has lost his place. And a friend flagged a tweet that came my way last week when I just raised the fact that of all the England stars who've moved in the summer, it seems like 4 of them are doing brilliantly, and of course the one who is struggling and is out of his team and is out of the England squad is Mason Mount. And someone with of course he had a verified tick on Twitter, which is a red flag in itself, but he said that he's been playing well since he came back from injury. I think he's only played well for 45 minutes against Crystal Palace in the League Cup. Now, if that is a compelling case for someone playing well, then fair enough. But factually, it isn't. He's been dreadful.
Why does this happen then, Rich, with Rashford, if we look at him a bit closer? 30 goals last season, the best season of his career, absolutely fantastic, singing his praises on this podcast. And he comes out, he just looks a complete shell of himself. And he's just devoid of confidence, he's not doing the right things, he's making the wrong decisions, and I feel as the weeks have progressed, it's just got worse. And it's just, he looks like a player who just thinks, I can't score. That chance when he took a touch and Kyle Walker went past him, he would have scored that last season. And what has went wrong? I don't understand. I'm scratching my head. I think supporters are. I think we all are.
Yeah.
I think Ten Hag must be as well.
I wish I knew the answer to that one, because it is just.
Did H not ask him on Sky Sports? No, that journalistic titan.
Our friend Ash said.
As soon as he gets a new contract.
Former employee, he said, now he's doing loads of media commitments this week. He's bound to score a hat-trick. Yeah. No, I don't think so.
Well, our friend Ash also made the prediction that he said as soon as Rashford gets a new contract, his form will dip.
He did say that, which was predictable.
Fallen off a cliff.
Like I said, I think the first couple of weeks of the season, I almost gave him a bit more sympathy, saying that he had the burden of last season. He's hardly had a rest, sort of, football-wise for a long time now, and there's obviously got an element of that. On the back of what was an inhumane sort of schedule last season, you've got the World Cup in there as well. He's played a hell of a lot of football, so that's got to take its toll. He probably just needs a prolonged rest, maybe, from that himself. But he's one of these players where it's almost just like whatever his form is, he just takes it to the extreme. When he's good, he can go on these incredible runs where it's just like world class, as he was last season. And then when things don't go his way, it just gets to him and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And he needs to save for himself at the moment. Like I said, Solskjaer used to have this knack of, he used to try and play players back into form just stick with them every single week and hope they got a goal that sparked them. I think for Rashford, he just needs to be taken out of the team because fundamentally he's just not good enough at the moment. And what message does that send to his teammates? Because I know Garnacho has traditionally never played well from the start himself, really, but he has to be playing ahead of Rashford right now. And the perverse thing as well yesterday is Rashford's best spells came when he played on the right. There was a brilliant ball into McTominay, which almost got the goal. And he, like I said, when he got the ball from central position and went out right for that Walker chance that he fired wide. But we are told Rashford can't play on the right. He doesn't want to play on the right. He prefers being on the left where he can cut inside on a stronger foot and fire shots at goal. Well, right now, United, they've got a huge issue still on their right wing. Why can't he just play there? Why can't he play there? Because then that opens up the left channel to someone like Garnacho. It even probably suits players like Bruno Fernandes playing better there if they have to be repurposed there. Because remember, some of Paul Pogba's best performances were when he's on the left wing cutting in. Fernandes was the same for me. But I think fundamentally, it's just inexcusable. You have to take him out of the team because I know every manager is going to have their favourites, but fundamentally this player just does not deserve to be starting every single week for Man United. He's not backing it up. The performances are getting worse. I think he needs to say him for himself. I think he just needs to take that team out of the firing line, give him a week off, say, look, this midweek, don't even bring him to the stadium, just let him have a night off, and you go again at the weekend against Fulham.
Go on, Rashford, get to the bar, have a pint, enjoy yourself on Wednesday night, or let the lads play, and rest up. Is that the advice for the
maybe
medical,
not a pint, but I'm saying, yeah, it depends what it's a pint of, to be honest. But yeah, I would honestly just say, have a few days off.
It looked like he had a birthday party last night, didn't it?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, Eamon Clark filed photographs from
the
China
game?
White. Well, yes. So you can imagine. Well, they were very careful. It should be stressed that Rashford hasn't been photographed, but I think these footballers were taking the back exit in. Vans were pulling right up to it. So you can imagine that's going to go down very badly with some supporters. I'm not saying it was right or wrong what he did. I mean, I think it's his birthday, is it, tomorrow? So it will have been around that. But
maybe he was having a beer then.
Yeah.
Now we'll not speculate on that. Samuel, you wrote a line on Richard Arnold today. The club is making progress despite poor start to the season. What's that? That's another baffling line to come out of.
I was baffled about it when I was told it as well. He's literally used those words to someone, an interested observer on United, and was talking to him about it. And he maintains they're making good progress. And that's a team who, as you said, have lost as many as they've won this season. I think it's won 7, lost 7. I suppose they had record revenue last week that they posted for last season, but
very Woodward, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a loss as well.
Playing performance doesn't impact our ability to make profit.
Indeed, but they still post a loss in those accounts. So I get it. I suppose sometimes he's asked these when he's speaking, and it's not on the record strictly. He's probably still a bit paranoid whether what he says it could get out there and and the share price is going to fluctuate or nosedive or what have you. But I suspect he deep down doesn't believe that, but he's kind of constrained as to what he can say. But also, he doesn't have to insult one's intelligence by saying United are making good progress when, as you said earlier, it's been their worst start to a season since 1986. And back then, of course, we'll know what happened in the November. Alex Ferguson was appointed.
So you're trying to suggest a manager of Ferguson's ilk is just on the horizon?
Well,
I don't think so.
I don't think there'll be a 4-man delegation driving up to Glasgow to sound out Brendan Rodgers. Although, I mean, having said that, there'll probably be some people thinking...
Don't tempt fate with that. Arnold wanted to brand himself as quite different to Ed Woodward, Rich, when he came in as CEO.
Wanted.
Wanted. It's definitely not happening like that. I mean, he's very much a Glazers man. We need to talk about the Glazers then. We have just said in the first part, look, the Glazers don't pick the team. They're not responsible for the tactics, the player performance. But there is a culture of failure, a culture of decline. We've saw over the last decade, the mismanagement. And there was an argument on Sky Sports, I think, between Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, actually, and they were debating that. And Neville was basically suggesting that as long as the Glazers are in charge, nothing's going to change. And of course, Ten Hag has to take a lot of responsibility for what's going on. But there is this overarching, I guess, it's a great depression around the club, isn't it, when the Glazers are custodians?
Yeah, well, there's always got to be the sort of devil's advocate of you who says, what if you got a Postecoglou or an Emery in and they spent the money wisely, United could suddenly overnight become title challenge or whatever. There is always that little part of your head that says that, but like you said, fundamentally, whenever United lose these games, it always comes back to the ownership. It always comes back to the fact that the people in charge at very top, as we said then, as long as they're making money off the pitch, that's all that matters fundamentally. If business matters are ahead of football matters, then the football is always going to be secondary in that regard. And it all does stem down to that ownership. And again, it brings it in. There's so many different facets of it. I mean, you look at the transfers, for example. You look at what Man City can do. And I know it's so tedious to always say, look at what they're doing. But when Pep Guardiola wants a player, he says, look, I want a centre-back. The transfer panel, Tixie goes off. And they make a short list of 3 centre-backs. And they say, which one do you want? It's not the manager choosing his players every single time, but that stems from having the football structure and people ahead of you and above you as well, who have the power, who have the knowledge and who have the care and interest of the club, which Man United fundamentally do not do. That it is a business, it's a brand, it is not a football club at the moment, because their interests of what happens on the pitch are secondary. And until that changes, I know it's tedious, but that fundamentally, you just cannot see it happening. And we've written about it so many times, it must fall on deaf ears to a degree now, because it is every single time United play one of their major rivals. You know that the Sky Sports Super Sunday pundits will all have the same debate after the game. I know you can say that, look, get a manager in, they spend money wisely, look, they spent £400 million, then it could change. It could, but it's very unlikely that's going to happen. And even if that did happen, it's not sustainable success because the owners simply do not care enough. And you know, Ratcliffe's sort of marginal takeover to begin with is a potential step in the right direction. I think fans will only sort of believe it when they see it for themselves. But yeah, it just all stems down to owners who just do not care about what happens on the pitch. It's not their interest.
So Jim Ratcliffe's obviously making an offer, or has made an offer for a minority stake, 25% of the club. He's going to take control of the football operations and have a big impact in that regard. But can he really have significant change at this club? Because at the moment it just feels broken, Samuel.
The talk is cheap even now. That's still to be ratified. There's no communique from the stock exchange. It's a 25% stake. It's Joel Glazer signs off everything. Is he just going to say, okay, you take care of the football side and I'll just enjoy this massive cash cow and live off that? I don't think he will. I don't think it's going to be necessarily as straightforward as that. But wherever you look at the club, there's something broken. The structure is just completely wrong. And Woodward told us years ago. He said, if you get recruitment wrong, you're fucked. I'm sure they'll beat that out. But that was his that was his outlook on it, and it's correct as well. If you do get it wrong, you're not going to have the right players in place, and you're not going to win things. And although they've got, I think Gary Neville said yesterday, they're the only club in the world that doesn't have a sporting director. I don't know whether he meant like the literal title of a sporting director, because that is true, but they have got a football director and they have got a technical director.
I think people don't actually, well, obviously fans do. You think the majority of fans understand that John Murder is the football director, but a lot of people still repeat that lie, that they don't. Obviously a sporting director is different.
I think it's, in fairness, I think they look at the way United sign players and they think, well, this is the manager say so that's the way it works. And maybe some of them are just, they forget that Murta is the football director, that he is at Carrington, that he is in the director's box for the home games as well. And also, I suppose from the summer we've just had, you've got this SEG influence coming in as well, where they've...
Kevin Voss?
Yeah, Kevin Voss.
Any listeners of the penultimate podcast will know that's a joke. It's Kevin Voss.
But there's that coming into it as well, and that's like a throwback to... I mean, you had the infamous period when Sir Alex Ferguson's son Jason was an agent and was trying to sign up United players left, right and centre, and that caused ructions at the club to the point that they put out a statement saying that they wouldn't actually be dealing with Jason Ferguson anymore, which is pretty extraordinary given Ferguson was the manager. But that has to change, and unfortunately for United, with Murta's position, there's not really been a standout signing where you can credit him with it, whereas at other clubs, Michael Edwards was credited with Mohamed Salah going to Liverpool. Chiki Begiristain is always the guy posing with the City signings, and look at his track record at City and look at his track record at Barcelona as well. And okay, the Casemiro signing was the one that you could say that was Murta, because look, United last summer, they were pursuing Frenkie de Jong for 100 odd days, whatever it was, and Murta was doing the legwork and putting in the groundwork on the off chance that they would go for Casemiro. They did. Casemiro was excellent last season. He hasn't been this season. And even that deal, when it was announced, everyone was, Schweinsteiger came to mind, Falcao came to mind. Unfortunately for United, Casemiro did buck that trend last season, but this season he has been performing how a lot of us feared he would be at the start of his United career. And so, although that was a success to an extent in the first season, it was still a signing that United had been making 8 years earlier, taking players from big clubs. And as a lot of United fans will say it now, and Rich was saying yesterday, in 3 years' time they'll probably try and sign Joshua Kimmich for 80 million, or when he's past 32, or certainly past his peak. And if Bayern Munich or Real Madrid or Barcelona want to sell these players at a certain age, you've got to think twice about that. And with Casemiro, although they've had short-term gain with a really good season, this season it's gone very wrong very quickly. And there's just not a strategy there. It's just no way to run a football club of signing players who played in the Eredivisie or were born in the Netherlands or who played for Ajax. It's wrong. Antony should never have been signed by United, and they were the only club in the world that were going to sign him because he played under Erik Ten Hag. No other club were coming close to him or going near him, and United still ended up paying 100 million euros for him, which is just...
This is a big statement, but could Antony be remembered as the worst signing in the club's history? And there's been a catalogue of really bad signings in the post-Ferguson era, let's say.
I think
Di Maria, Schweinsteiger, these big names.
For the fee paid and what he's actually delivered, and his track record, and the fact that at least Di Maria, he had just won the Champions League, he was man of the match in the final, he's won a World Cup, he is a good footballer. It didn't work out for him United. Antony, he wasn't even a stand-up player for Ajax in Eredivisie. I mean, you look at players who've been signed for the Premier League, you look at Van Wolfswinkel and Josie Altidore, they were plundering 30 goals a season in the Eredivisie. This is Antony, who was barely getting double digits, and someone said no other team wanted him, and if another team wanted him,
where would he go after United?
Well, who would have even bought him over when United did buy him?
Back to Brazil.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Back to Ajax.
Yeah.
Absolute mess. We'll be back for a moment in part 3.
Whether it's the legendary Lionesses, grassroots or expert analysis of the women's leagues, Women's Football News has it all covered. A brand new monthly magazine packed with news, interviews and expert opinion. Don't miss Women's Football News. Pick up a copy today from participating retailers. Women's football is here to stay, and so are we.
Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, don't worry, producer Seb in the corner. I am giving a nod to the Women's Football Monthly magazine. If that's your cup of tea, head across to Reach PLC online, check it out. Some good interviews, etc., and good coverage of the women's game. So give that a shout out. Anyways, back to Manchester United. Look at the fixtures. Rich, Samuel just kind of mentioned them. We've got Newcastle on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup, Fulham away, Copenhagen away, then Luton at home, Everton away. Those 5 games, Manchester United should be winning all 5 games. But I mean, the last half an hour of the podcast.
You should go on there, because then it's Galatasaray away and Newcastle away. And I think that period, with just the away games, you start to worry for Ten Hag.
And can they come through that period? What's your prediction in the next few weeks?
I might have to go sort of Gattuso on this, because
sometimes it'll be good, sometimes.
Yeah, we're allowed to throw on this podcast now. Samuel's sort of putting a seal on that. Maybe it's so perverse that I'm expecting so little from United that they might surprise me by being okay in the next few games. I do think that they all look very, very tough. I would always sort of back United at home in the Carabao Cup, just because what they did last season. Newcastle on Wednesday night, it's going to be an interesting one that I know you'll have your own verdict on the game. But beyond that, like Samuel said, Fulham away. That United have this ability to make any game look tricky right now. Copenhagen looks difficult. And even saying Everton there, I mean, that win at West Ham looked very impressive from them.
We said recently on the podcast Fulham have been poor. I watched them against Tottenham. I thought they were all right. And then they got a point just at the weekend there against Brighton, didn't they? So, potential bananas skin.
Yeah, and they've got some players, I mean, obviously from my point of view, like Harry Wilson scored twice against Croatia in the international break. He's in good form at the moment. He'll be fancying himself. You know, Boyd, a Liverpool fan, he'll be fancying himself to pile more misery on them. Fulham have some good players, you know, in their squad anyway. And we saw last season how difficult it was. You know, United got that last minute winner from Garnacho, but Fulham were the better side probably for a chunk of that game, certainly. And yeah, right now this United team, as someone said, it stems back to what do you even suggest for a team right now? Like you said, on Wednesday night, it'd be nice to see some youngsters play. But when it comes back to the Fulham game on Saturday, it might be influenced by the Carabao Cup game. But there is no sort of logical or safe option anymore with the lineup because the key players and the star players aren't performing well enough. And there is a case to drop just about anyone. There is no one. You talk about first name on the team sheet. It's sort of this weekend, it should be Varane, Onana, and just do a raffle for the others because who cares? Like, it doesn't matter right now. But you might as well because right now there is no rhyme or reason for United's lineups.
Obviously Newcastle then, Samuel, will move on to the game. They defeated Manchester City at St James's Park in the last round. United brushed aside Crystal Palace in a non-event really, 3-0. I thought this game was going to be a real test of United's credentials. Newcastle obviously were in excellent form, but they've been really badly affected by injuries in the last few weeks. They're losing some key players, Isaac, Harvey Barnes, etc. I could go on. So I think their team is going to be quite weak. I think Eddie Howe will play the second string. Can United's second string beat Newcastle's second string? And we talked about changes. What changes would you make for the game?
I don't think it'll be a second string from United. I mean, Onana started against Palace in the previous round, and we all thought, well, it would probably be Bayinder's debut. So why would you start Bayinder against a far better team in Newcastle? Newcastle have, they've still got their trophy drought, which that in itself is an incentive. Then there's the United angle to it. So although it seems like every team they do make a reasonable amount of changes in League Cup games, you've also got to field a team that's pretty strong enough, that is good enough that the way I look at it from Eddie Howe, I suspect Eddie Howe will look at it in terms of the team that he picks. He'll pick a team that he thinks can beat United on the night. Now there'll be changes to it, of course, but I don't think he's just going to look at that game as one to toss it off just because they're in Europe this season.
The carrot's dangled there from a Newcastle perspective. You've got a United team here wounded and struggling.
Absolutely.
If you put a relatively strong
City
team
out of the competition as well. Newcastle, if they beat United, they'll have a good.
Tottenham are out as well,
Arsenal
aren't they?
still in, I think, on Arsenal and Liverpool. So Arsenal, Liverpool,
the
United
draws
are the
always
big
got play
teams
out,
still.
But it's opened up a little bit with Chelsea out. I can't remember. No, I think Chelsea
they're still
through.
Yeah.
But I mean, Chelsea. They're as much of a basket case as
Chelsea.
United these days. But it has opened up a little bit where City monopolised the competition for, it felt like, about half a decade until United won it last year. They're out of it, so it would be remiss of Newcastle to just have a cursory interest in this game when they've already knocked out City, and United are really reeling from a really bad result at the weekend. But as I said earlier, I would start Mainu. I know he's not had any first team minutes since, goodness, it was probably the Leicester game in February. In terms of competitive minutes, I should stress, because as I said, he was quite prominent in pre-season until he got that injury against Real Madrid. But Ten Hag has big plans for him, and he is a player in Ten Hag's image, and we're talking about fearing for Ten Hag because of these sequence of fixtures coming up. Well, try and implement your style, and I think that will bank goodwill with the supporters as well. It should be noted that those in the Stretford end were singing Beyond Full Time yesterday, which again that did, thinking about it now, reminded me a little bit of when United got thumped 3-0 by Liverpool under Moyes. You had a lot of singing going on there because there was that defiance, and I don't think they've gone quite as far back as the Moyes era just yet, but it's still another worrying parallel for them. So I would get Mainu in. Garnacho has to start. So be it if you want to trial Rashford on the right and see if he's up to it, if he wants to do it. I mean, it would be very Generation Z, millennial of these footballers to watch the Beckham Netflix documentary and realise, I could play on the right hand side. I'm right footed. I could just cross it in. As if footballers weren't doing that for more than a century anyway. In terms of a lot of the others, Varane obviously has to come in and play a left back if you've got a left back, because look what happened with Lindelof. So there have to be substantial changes, and I'm sure there will be. If this is another worrying thing for United. Casemiro has been one of their worst players this season, but it feels like he's been missed now because he's missed a few games. Amrabat has been dreadful, and look, objectively, Casemiro is a better defensive midfielder. So you pair him with Mainu. That's what Ten Hag was trying to do in pre-season. You've invested in Mason Mount. Are you going to work him into your team because he's not been starting in these very important games recently? So although it's a vital game for United and possibly represents their best chance of silverware, I think he's also got to look at it as an opportunity to let's implement a style. Let's try and turn the page here, because they have got the players to do it. I think I don't buy for 1 minute that they have a shortage of talent in that squad to play in a crowd-pleasing way, that not necessarily win every week, but at least play a style of football that the fans are going to get behind, rather than just hoiking it and
controlling a match.
Yeah, exactly.
You should be able to control a match against Copenhagen and Sheffield United. You should have much more grip on it, and we've always told from the moment Ten Hag came in that this is the United team. He's going to look to soak up possession. He's not going to try to get the ball just for the sake of it, but his team has got to be in control of matches, and they're not now. And you can't say that's down to the owners. That is down to Ten Hag's tactical approach. That's down to maybe the personnel not being up to it. But like someone said, they've got enough players there that you can't just keep on saying they need to spend more and more.
You talk about doing that in games against Sheffield United or Copenhagen, but at home against anybody, it doesn't matter whether it's City or Barcelona or Bayern Munich. Manchester United should be performing better than they did on Sunday evening.
Yeah, they should be able to match the bigger teams.
At home, 100%. You should be able to go toe-to-toe with any opposition, really. I'm not saying it's going to make or break the season, but the game on Wednesday is really important because, as Samuel's just said, it does represent the best chance for silverware, probably. We've just talked about the teams who are still left, and it's looking pretty grim for the remainder of the season as far as top four is concerned. So this game is quite important on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I remember when Mourinho got sacked, they were out of the League Cup by then, weren't they? They lost a Derby
on
game.
Penalties.
But if you got to the end of December and United were already out of the League Cup, mid-table, and out of the Champions League,
that's a disaster.
That's an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
But if you're still in the League Cup, there's always going to be that argument of, well, we could win a trophy this season. We saw what it did last season. These players have got that winning mentality. Obviously, it's not come to fruition, but there's always got to be that argument, that a cup run could be what gets you back on track, really. So I think from United's benefit, it's not one that you want to sort of throw away. They need to take it seriously. It might only be the League Cup, but right now that's the only trophy they've really got a chance of winning, you'd say realistically. So they've got to pursue it properly, and they've got to treat it with respect. Like Samuel said, mix up the team to a degree, but still United need to win this game. They need to put in another convincing performance like we saw in the last round of the competition, and they need to give the fans something to believe in. They need to prove after this tough week that Ten Hag is the right man going forward and that he is someone worth sticking by.
Wan-Bissaka could be back as well, I think. He was in training on Friday, wasn't he? So potentially. And Samuel's got his little...
I mean, that's not exactly Roy Keane coming back at the start of the treble season, is it?
I was about to say, I'm considering that as a huge boost, but that's where we are right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
I do think there is an element of once you've got Shaw and Wan-Bissaka back, then that will really help.
Shaw's a huge miss, definitely, on that side.
Wan-Bissaka's been really good this calendar year.
Yeah, I'm not doing it as a slight on him. Yeah, he has had a good calendar year.
But if Wan-Bissaka played on Sunday, United still lose that game.
Yeah, of course.
It's not that sort of transformative.
So you had to nail your colour to the mast, and Samuel, United progressing to the next round of the Carabao Cup, do you think? And I mean,
I'm not a betting man, unlike Samuel.
You're not. I don't know who you're talking about.
Or some of the Newcastle squad.
Very true. But if we look a bit further ahead, you discussed it's 8 o'clock there, the 2nd of December at St James's Park. A bit further
You've got it ringed in your calendar already.
In a few weeks' time, but they should get through on Wednesday, but that game's going to be a real test, isn't it? It's going to be completely different, you'd think, to Wednesday night.
That's why I said, in terms of extending the bank of fixtures, because when they come back from the November internationals, it's Goodison away, and they've had some we've had some horror shows there over the years. It's Galatasaray away, which is probably the ultimate bear pit in Europe, and then it's Newcastle away at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. That's a very treacherous trio of fixtures, and we'll know that they're going to go into the November internationals unless they somehow win these next 4 games. I don't think anyone's expecting that, but the chances are they'll go into the internationals in a bit of a humdrum mood. Okay, they should go into it at least with a win because they're coming up against Luton, but it's that period is, and then not long after Newcastle they've got Liverpool away just before Christmas. I think there's Chelsea at home at Christmas. So
yeah, December looks really tough as well.
Already at home as well, which could be a deciding.
Is it going to be a winter of discontent again? And that'd be another alarming parallel with Van Gaal. Of course, he really should have been sacked in that December of 2015, but somehow stuck around for the remainder of the season. And we've not really touched upon it, but I was quite alarmed by some of Ten Hag's answers in the press conference yesterday. He did just sound quite deluded, and he's never really sounded like that before. And although he's like Van Gaal, he's a Dutch manager, and like Van Gaal, he managed Ajax. They're very different characters, and they're not necessarily kindred spirits. But listening to Ten Hag yesterday, it did remind me of some of the dross, frankly, that Van Gaal used to come out with when he was United manager.
Just the club's fault. It just creeps into these managers. They arrive at Manchester, upbeat and positive, and the club just gets them all. Yeah, gets under their skin. Yeah. We'll leave it there then. Thank you very much for your time, Samuel.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thank you, Rich.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to listeners as usual. Head across and check her out on all the social channels. Have a great week and take care.